And we are back here on the midweek mailbag. Myself and Eric Schlitt answering your questions live here on twitch.tv/Pride of Detroit every Tuesday afternoonish, somewhere between the 12 and 2 hour. Let's go right back to our live audience here. A question from Lantana. A question for the president of the Jeff Okuda fan club, and I think we might have to debate who that is. If Jeff plays like this the whole season, is he considered a lockdown corner?
Oh, well, I think lockdown gets thrown out very liberally sometimes,
Sure.
right? And while he has been very good and he's getting a ton of credit for shutting down Justin Jefferson, but he was able to play a lot of underneath coverage because he knew he had to bracket it over the top, which is the exact right game plan that you're supposed to do with Jefferson. Like 100%, they did the right thing. But it wasn't all Jeff. Now, Jeff was one-on-one a lot, and he still managed to just, keep him off the books there as well. So, but yeah, I mean, he's headed in the right direction where he's going to be, I mean, he's probably the clear number one on the team right now. And but lockdown status, I don't know. It's in his range. It's in his range. I just don't know. He'd have to take a few more steps forward.
And listen, like you said, DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett this upcoming week, another set of really good receivers, and that doesn't stop. Like this is a league of really, really good receivers. But listen, the fact that and I know, like you said, he had safety over top, but the fact that they had him shadowing Justin Jefferson really says a lot about how much they believe in this guy and how much they think he's, the level he's playing at right now. You don't entrust a guy to do that, even with over the top help, unless you really believe this guy's playing at a high level. And listen, he is. I mean, I don't want to say he shut down three guys in 3 straight weeks, because again, that's kind of oversimplifying what happened, but he's confident. He's playing well. As Dan Campbell said last week, he has not lost anything physically in terms of his speed, in terms of his mobility, anything like that. And so, yeah, I mean, if he can do this for a full season, like, yeah, maybe, but we're not there yet. We're not close to there yet, I think.
And think about the leap that you take as a corner once you get like 15, 16 games under your belt. Like you typically then that's where you see your next big leap. And that's right about where he is right now, right? Like he's in that range where he's just now starting to get enough snaps under his belt that he could turn a corner and he could elevate his game even more. I don't think we've seen the top output from him yet. I think he's still an ascending player that can be, one of the better corners in the league.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't so long ago where like the saying was year 3 is when cornerbacks really seem to settle in, and this is technically year 3 for him, but it's almost really like the end of his rookie season.
Yeah.
So we'll see. But yeah, I think definitely trending in a really positive direction, and I don't think you could have expected much more out of him through 3 games coming off that Achilles.
Think of where he was. I mean, he was competing for a starting spot when camp opened,
a month ago.
Right?
2 months
and
ago.
then all of a sudden it was like, okay, he's playing well, okay, he's playing better, okay, he's taking the next step, and you could see him slowly getting better.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it was like, all right, he's better than Will Harris, and it's not even close. And then it was, okay, now he's creeping up on trying to be the number one, and it's like, okay, now he's the number one. And where else he's just going to keep climbing, in my opinion. I am very happy that he was able to come back from his Achilles this season and not next, because I don't think I would have been able to handle the bus talk for too much longer.
Just the growing frustration. He's finally out there. He's finally playing, and he's playing at a much higher level than we've really ever seen out of him.
Absolutely.
Next question comes from Katie. Asks, how would you grade Aaron Glenn so far? I feel like he isn't living up to the hype, but is that due to lack of talent or his coaching?
I think it's a little from column A, a little from column B.
Sure.
I think talent is a big factor. I think he's been really smart in utilizing the blitz. I think he's been passive at times. That was a bit unusual, which is ironic considering that he's can really dial it up. It's kind of a reflection of the head coach.
I was just about to say Dan Campbell, the most aggressive guy until he gets tantalized by a 54-yard field goal.
In my opinion, I think Glenn knows what to do in the right spots. And, but he is still only a couple games into his second year as a defensive coordinator. And so there's going to be mistakes. Um, and I think to expect him to be perfect in year two is that's a really high bar. But I think the lack of success is more of talent based as opposed to coaching.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a good point because there's kind of two parts to his job, right? It is the play calling, and I think that is something he's still learning and getting better at, and that's something that we maybe need to preach a little patience to ourselves with. But player development also remains a huge part of his job, and I think on that front, we're seeing a lot of good things. Not everyone is where we want them to be, but I think you have to be happy with like Jeff Okuda is in a pretty good spot. The fact that we got as much as we did out of Charles Harris last year, maybe it hasn't been there yet. I think Aleem is playing better than most people realize right now.
Tracy Walker took a step.
Tracy Walker.
Yep.
I hate to bring that up as an example, but he was playing pretty damn well at the beginning of the season. Yep. But there are definitely some questions too, like what's the deal with Derek Barnes? Is he ever going to be a starting linebacker on this team? I guess not everyone is progressing at the rate that you'd like to see, but that's called the NFL draft. That's called football. Like not everyone reaches their full potential, and that might not have anything to do with coaching, right?
It's an interesting case because he was in the mix for starting. Derek Barnes, sorry.
Yeah.
He was in the mix, for a long time, right up until the end, and then he was still, getting reps in week 1.
Yep.
And then they just shut him down. And I don't know if there's if it's just like he's not playing as well as Chris Board because he's not, or if it's hey, let's scale him back and focus him a little bit more and then unleash him again a little bit later. Kind of like, look at what they like with James Houston. Like they were like, okay, we got to scale things back for him, and then we're going to build him up, and then we're going to be able to have him down the road. And maybe that's what they're doing at this stage. Maybe they're trying to reset him and kind of see where they go. I don't know. It'd be interesting to see because it was kind of a drastic like 180 where he went from contributing to not.
Yeah, and I think maybe the other thing that is falling on Aaron Glenn's lap fairly or unfairly is like the secondary miscommunications. That was a very common thing that we talked about all last season. Creeped up a little bit on Sunday. Not as much as I think people, there was the deep shot that Cousins just missed, and then there was obviously the touchdown at the end. But you have to figure in, like, you lost Tracy Walker, who is your main communicator in the secondary, and as everyone said this week, the smartest guy on defense. You take him out of the equation, well, like, there's going to be a little scrambling to do because, as we just said, the depth on this team is young and inexperienced. Juju Smith is a guy who's not played a lot of football. Anyone else that steps in, if it's Iffy, has not played a lot of football, guess what? There's going to be communication mistakes when he steps in because that's just what happens when you play football for the first time at the NFL level.
Especially in the scheme where you're passing guys off, right? Like in a lot of ways, we talk about how the offensive line works really well when you can have consistency amongst the starters because it helps the communication level work. It's the same thing in this scheme when it comes to the secondary is you need to be able to have that consistency of working with the guy to be able to pass them off and understand where they're going. Now, with the injuries on the offensive line, we've seen that work because of Hank Fraley and how Hank Fraley intermixes them positionally during practice to the point where they know how to work together in different scenarios. And he's got that entire group of like 10 guys working as cohesive units, intermixing different positionally and so he's been working on establishing that communication for, weeks now, years now, even, realistically with some of these guys. And so injecting somebody into the starting lineup for the secondary, you're almost playing a little bit of catch up. And like you said, there's going to be these communication issues. I don't care who is back there and replacing Tracy. You're going to have to be conscious of that. And they're going to have to be very loud in talking to one another. So ideally having this game at Ford Field will, it'll be a little easier on them.
No, it'll be harder.
Well, maybe.
They're
I
going to
mean,
be,
like,
because
because
the crowd's going to be loud when the defense
right,
is on the
yeah.
field, right?
No, I agree with you. But right. I mean, okay. I was thinking like more like how the crowd doesn't necessarily maintain that level through,
True.
right?
Sure.
And so but yeah, all right.
It could be a little trickier.
It
Something to
could
keep
be.
an eye on. Quick. This is a quick one that we can just kind of knock out here. Alien Vivid asks, with week 4 here, is anyone activated off IR and plays in week 5? Jacobs, Kabinda, Onzarike. Point of clarity: you have to miss 4 games before you can be activated. Correct?
Correct.
So no one will be activated this week. It would have to start next week, and then they could theoretically play in week 5, but given how the
Yeah.
Lions like to kind of, like you said, the acclimation period has been set at 3 weeks. It might be different for some of these veterans or some guys who've
Mm-hmm.
been around the building. Like Jerry's been moving around pretty good, so I think there's a chance he doesn't have to wait the full 3 weeks. But yeah,
Yeah.
in terms of the guys, I think we talked about this last time. The guys that are closest seem to be Jerry. I think
Mm-hmm.
Kabinda's probably somewhat close, and then everything else is kind of like, I don't know, we'll see.
Yeah.
I guess,
And
yeah,
especially with the bye in week 6,
right,
I don't see any of the guys on Pupper or NFI being activated working through the acclimation process ahead of the bye.
right,
I
and being
think
ready
all
for
of
that
them.
Patriots game.
Yeah, you're talking about the Cowboys game at the earliest for some of these guys, and some of them won't come back till after the Cowboys game, and some of them won't be ready at all. Like there's some guys that they're like with Romeo.
Right.
I'm not expecting Romeo to be back by the Cowboys game.
Yeah.
I
think that's like a fingers crossed, maybe Thanksgiving type of thing.
yeah.
Next question from JP is me asks, how do you feel about Chark's usage? Seem to be getting more underneath targets this week. And I know some people, we talked about it last week about maybe being a little disappointed in his early start. He picks up 40 yards on the first drive of this game, and then I think he catches one pass the rest of the game. What are your thoughts on Chark so far?
I got this question on Twitter too. I think we got it in our feed, and then I've got it personally as well. People asking, is it, when Jameson is ready to come back, is he possibly going to eat into Chark's targets as opposed to Josh Reynolds, because Josh Reynolds was the better receiver last week.
Sure.
And in my opinion, I still think Chark is the best receiver on the outside. I think he's better than Josh Reynolds. I think Josh Reynolds is the beneficiary of Chark drawing that extra attention, right?
Yeah.
Chark is always going to draw the number one corner. Chark is part of the appeal of Chark is that he's going to stretch the field and he's going to draw other people to him, which then frees up other people like Josh Reynolds to be the guy who ends up making the catches. So I still think Chark is the best outside option. And so when Jameson comes back, I still think Jameson is going to eat into Josh Reynolds' targets. But I do agree with the fact that it would be neat to see him get more underneath targets. It would be neat to try and when guys are not playing him head up, shift him into the slot. Get him in a more favorable matchup and let him try and get some yak on a quick crosser or something like that. I think there's ways that they can get him involved a little bit more, but a big part of his game is the attention that he draws, freeing up other people.
Well, yeah, and it'll be interesting to see if they maybe use him in more of those situations now with Amon-Ra being a little dinged up. We don't know if he's going to miss a game or not, but it sounds like that's certainly on the board. And so what do you do there? And I think that's kind of an interesting topic of conversation. Like we saw a little bit of Khalif, we saw a little bit more of Quintez. I don't know. I think Khalif got a target or two, but I don't think Quintez did. So we'll see a little bit more of them, but I wonder if part of the strategy there is to maybe move around some of your top 2 guys in the slot a little bit there.
Yeah, if St. Brown is not available, you have to be more creative in getting Chark open because he's your next best pass catching option. I know the Josh Reynolds connection is with Goff is great, and there's a trust that you can build there. But I don't think Reynolds has that range that Chark does to be able to shift him around in places. So, yeah.
All right, we'll go with 2 more here. Another one from Lantana. I like this one. What game would concern you more if we lose? Seahawks at home or Patriots away?
Seahawks at home, because I don't think the Seahawks are very good. The Seahawks defense has been just a shell recently. Yeah,
Yeah.
like it really has been. They didn't force a 3-and-out until the end of the second quarter of game 3. Okay. Like they didn't force an offense to go 3-and-out in the first 2 games, period. Right. Like they're just not aggressive. If you look at their, like, if you're just like trying to casually look at what their roster looks like and you look at their PFF scores, right? You have their, I think there was one player on their defensive line that has a PFF grade above like 40 or like in the 40s. Like there's only one. Like all of their guys are not just getting low PFF grades, they're getting like really low PFF grades. And you read the articles on like field goals, the SB Nation Seahawks site, and they're just like, if this defense isn't the worst in the league right now, I don't know what is. And so like I I haven't done my full game watch yet from their last week. I just watched the the game. It was when did they play? Was it Sunday night that they played? I'm trying to remember what game. I saw a chunk of it for whatever reason. Oh, they played Denver on
That was the week before.
no, Denver was
They
week
played
1. I
Atlanta.
saw that game.
They played
Yeah,
Atlanta.
Atlanta. Thank you.
Yeah.
So I think I just watched the highlights. I haven't watched my full game recap yet, um but it, they didn't seem to really be able to have an answer for Atlanta, who just was kind of moving the ball all over them. And Atlanta was 0-2 going into the game, and I guess they hadn't been. I don't know. My point is, I'm getting off track here. My point is the Seahawks game is really set up for the Lions to do well, and it's at home. I would be a lot more concerned with that. Like just because it just seems like they're in a spot where they should win this week.
Yeah, I do think the Seahawks offense is maybe a little bit underrated. I think they're
Yeah,
moving the
no,
ball
they're
pretty
good.
well, and
Mm-hmm.
why can't I think of the quarterback's name?
Geno Smith.
Geno Smith is
Yeah,
playing well-ish,
yeah, they got
better than
good skill
expected.
players.
And they
Yeah.
got a good skill player. So I don't think this is like a walk in the park. I remain pretty surprised by the 6.5 point line on this game. And maybe this is just me protecting myself, because I feel like if the Lions lose this game, Lions fans are going to lose their freaking minds. In fact, I know they will.
Certainly.
So there's a lot of, I feel like there's a lot on the line in terms of just the morale of this fan base for this game.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not, I mean, this is the NFL. There's no game that you can just be like, yep, we got that one. And while I think
Right.
this is one of the easier games on the schedule, you still got to come out and play it. And if the Lions are missing Swift, and if the Lions are missing Amon-Ra, and they're dealing with some shuffling of safeties, like, this is not a gimme.
Yeah, no, but this offense is, if this offense is as good as what we think they are, they should be able to move the ball, and they should be able to score. And it could end up being a shootout again.
Sure.
And that's, if you put yourself in a shootout at home, you should, the arrow should point towards you. And then I think a lot of the matchups I like pretty good as well. So, on paper, I see a lot of arrows pointing towards the Lions. And I think that's, look, and there's a reason Vegas is putting out the line that they are.
No, they were wrong about the Vikings, per usual. Lions 3-0 against the spread.
Well, against the spread, right? But
Sure.
so the Lions, if they're 3-0 against the spread, then this should be a touchdown victory.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah, because Lions always play really great with a 6-point spread, right? There's no counter examples.
No, but yeah. But my point is if they've been covering the spread, you gotta like gotta like where they're at.
All right, we'll end with this one. A little Jared Goff talk from McVay Rob asks, do you think Goff's play is surprising? He played great last week and has been pretty good through 3 weeks.
It's a little surprising because he's been trusting his offensive line a lot more. And they've been, coming through for him. I think he's hung in the pocket a little bit more than you saw from him in the past. And when he has decided to make his legs work, He's been relatively effective with them. It's only a handful of chances, but he's done it. I mean, to the point where you were even doing a golf scramble count, right,
Yeah.
on Twitter during the game, right?
The little spin move, he did it 3 times
And
on
it worked
Sunday,
every time.
and it worked every time.
And then, like, he had that like 10-yard scramble in against Washington
Mm-hmm.
to keep the drive going. That was a pivotal drive, and so you can tell the trust level is there. Like, remember last year, all that stuff that he was doing, leaking out the back of the pocket. They didn't have Taylor Decker when he
True.
was doing that stuff, right?
True.
And so I think he's gotten more comfortable, and so yeah, I think that with that comfort comes confidence. With confidence comes a more successful Jared Goff. That's been the MO on him, since day one.
Yeah. I would say most has not been all that surprising. I mean, partially because we saw it at the end of last season,
Yeah,
partially because we saw a lot of it during training camp.
camp. Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, I think that thing specifically on Sunday, his movement in the pocket was the best I've maybe seen it since he's been here in Detroit. And it was huge. Like, he got out of sacks, he was able to throw the ball away, and maybe his best play the entire game, I think it came on like a 4th and 2. Minnesota ran a stunt, and I think it was Zadarius Smith just came screaming right up the middle. He just like casually sidestepped him, rolled to his left, and found Khalif for a 5, 6, 7, 8 yard gain on a first down on a 4th and 2. And so it was a huge play in the game, and that's something that we hadn't seen that out of him at all. And it's like, part of his game is that he's actually kind of okay at throwing on the run. It's just a matter of getting into open space, evading the pressure that he's just not very good at. And so if he can continue that, like, that's a whole nother dimension to his game that really has been untapped since he landed here in Detroit. I have other gripes with him. I think his in general, his overall accuracy has not been up to snuff for me. Missed on a few deep shots in the first 2 weeks, and he had that unfortunate one where Josh Reynolds just lost it on Sunday. But the Lions need to connect on more of those, right? I feel like that's the one thing that Goff and his receivers just haven't connected on yet. There hasn't really been, what's the deepest pass he's thrown? That touchdown pass to DJ Shark? I feel like that's the deepest pass he's connected on so far. And so I feel like that's the one dimension of this offense, of this passing offense, where all the explosion plays are coming on the ground. I want to see more through the air. And so, you can blame Goff, you can blame the receivers. It's a little bit of both.
You honestly, you may have to, because you may have to see those explosion plays come through the air, because I don't know if their ground game is going to be as effective with the couple of moves that they made, right?
Sure.
With Swift being hurt and with shifting Evan Brown in favor of and then putting Logan Stenberg on the bench.
Yeah.
I thought that was a strategic move because they wanted to be more pass heavy.
Right.
And I think you saw that negative result on the ground. I think a lot of the impact or lack of success you saw last week, and I say lack of success, they still had 140 yards, right?
Right.
But comparative to the first 2 weeks, I think that running game was a bit of a downgrade, because either they knew Swift wasn't going to be, he was hurting, and they were like, okay, we've got to be able to protect Goff more if we're not going to have Swift be as impactful.
Right.
Or they said, we want to put the ball more in Goff's hands in this game, and we're willing to like sacrifice the run a little bit. And so if Swift isn't going to be around for a couple, I think that's the strategy going to be moving forward, is they're going to say, yeah, we're still going to try and chunk, yards in the run game. But I think what we saw over the first 2 weeks isn't going to be there necessarily with Swift not available. Like, I like Jamal, but Jamal is kind of what he is.
Right.
He's not that explosive play guy. Craig can be that explosive play guy. But he, he's
far less consistent.
Have a great game.
Right.
Yeah. And I know you're a Jamar,
Jackson.
Jackson guy.
Yeah.
Dude, JJs are killing me.
Yep.
Them, right. But I know you're a Jackson guy. I'm not as much a Jackson guy. I get that. I get what you like about him. But he is on the spot in the roster where he is kind of for a reason in my mind. I don't know if Jermar Jefferson, he's a little bit more decisive, but he was not nearly as productive as the other two were. I still think I would lean on Craig and try and get Craig into a rhythm and try and get him to go.
Sure.
But I don't know. I don't know. When you lose a guy like Swift, your running game is going to be impacted. And they've almost like said, we're going to shift away from it and put in a guy who's better pass pro, because we want to put the ball in Goff's hands more. And so I don't know. I think it really impacted like how efficient they were. Like in my mind, they were using the running game, and then that was making it a lot easier to come up with the pass. Trying to throw the pass to set up the run isn't as effective, and I don't think they're as effective as doing it. And that almost seems like what they're going to have to do the next couple of weeks. They're almost going to have to use that pass right to set the run up, and I don't think you really want to do that, in my opinion. Or I don't think that's as impactful. So maybe you're not. That's why you didn't see 35 points last game. That's probably why you're not going to see 35 points next game, even though it's a bad defense. My guess, right? But I would like to see them, when they get guys healthy, go back to what they were doing in the first two, as opposed to what we saw in Minnesota.
Yeah.
Even though I think we're going to see the Minnesota type offense the next couple of weeks.
Well, let me throw some heat on the Justin Jackson fire from Jared Goff today on 97.1 The Ticket. Says we'll definitely have to do some things a little different, referring to the absence of DeAndre Swift if he doesn't play. But we got players, man. We got guys that can step up. Obviously, we have a lot of faith in Jamal and Craig Reynolds, but Justin Jackson will step up in some way, I'm sure. And we'll do some things a little bit different. Swift is a great player and we'll miss him, but we have guys that can fill in when needed.
He's a veteran. Like, he's got good hands. He's probably your best pass catcher.
I just think it's more of a, obviously no, he's not as explosive to Swift, but in terms of just the explosiveness, the archetype, I feel like they're probably the closest.
I get why you say that. I do. And I still think in the scapping scheme that they run, I still think Craig is their better option. Okay. Even better than Jamal. And I think Jamal is what he is. He's going to get you a handful of yards. When you give it to him, he'll get you 4 yards, 5 yards. But he's not going to be the guy that like get you 8. Yeah. Right. I mean, he will. I mean, I'm exaggerating. You're right. But I think just the way that the gapping scheme is, and the way that you're asking guys to run downhill, and then you want that little bit of athleticism kicker. Yeah. I think you can get that out of Craig. And I know that Jackson has that. He definitely is more of an athlete. Right. And he is definitely a more veteran guy who can, you can count on. But until I start seeing him recognize and just flying downhill,
that's the vision, right? That's the big thing.
That's what I'm waiting on. And I've seen that from Craig in the past.
Sure.
And so I would love to see them on second down, or on first or second down, have Craig in there and trying, chunk out 6, 7, 8 yards, right? And if you can, gives you a whole wide variety of things that you can do. I don't think you're going to get in 2nd and 2 with Jamal back there. And as much as I love Jamal, and I just don't see that explosiveness to his game. There's a role. He's great at it. He's got 4 touchdowns already. You know what I mean? Like he never had multi-touchdown game in his career, and he's already had 2 this year.
Yeah.
Right. Like he's playing well.
He is. Nothing against him.
He's not the home run part of his game that, he's not that. Yeah. And I don't even need home runs. He's not the double. He's not getting you doubles. Right. He's not getting you infield triples. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah. As opposed to outfield triples.
Right. Well, get both.
Sure. All right. We're going to end it there. Thank you, Eric, for joining us, for being back. We'll be doing this weekly again every Tuesday afternoon between 12 and 2. You can join us here live on twitch.tv/Pride of Detroit. We'll also have a whole bunch of other stuff on our podcast feed, including First Bite this week, breaking down Lions Seahawks before it happens. We actually have a special podcast coming later this week as well, which to our live audience, we're going to be recording later today. But until then, thank you all for joining us. Thank you all for listening. It's chaos. Be kind.